Joining us now is Tara Palmieri, senior political reporter for Puck News. Okay, in your latest article, you spoke to conservative legal scholar and former Trump advisor John Yoo about what Trump can and cannot actually get done in his first day or days in office. So what was the conclusion there?
You know, the conclusion is that Trump has a lot of power when it comes to foreign policy. Like, he can really, help broker a peace agreement with Ukraine and Russia. He could drop a bomb on Tehran. Congress gives him a lot of power to do that. But in terms of finishing the border wall, he needs congressional approval and, frankly, the budget to do that. He can't just tap the money from the Treasury like he tried to do during the first term. I mean, he can, order ICE to start mass deportations, but cities and states can try to halt that. And then there's the question over whether he can stop funding or cut off funding to these various cities and states that act as sanctuary cities. That'll be up to Congress to enforce that as well. And birthright citizenship, that'll end up going to the courts, and he'll probably lose that. He can tell the Department of Justice, his attorney general, to start investigating his enemies list. But at the end of the day, you need a jury, a grand jury, to decide whether to prosecute or not, to go through with charges. And so, he has to deal with the courts in a lot of these cases. So can he pardon everyone from the January 6th insurrection on day one? Yeah, he can do that. Could he possibly pull out of NATO? That's unclear. It's not actually a clear thing because it is a treaty. And so far, the Constitution allows the president to pull out of treaties. And I think that's going to be tested. He could definitely pull out the Paris Climate Accord because, that was not ratified by Congress. So, there are a number of things that he can really do that can create an earthquake, that can create a lot of psychological warfare for humans, particularly those who are impacted by communities where there are large numbers of migrants. And if, they're seen as a mass deportation, that can impact communities. But, a lot of these things could be held up on day one from the courts, like when he tried to impose a Muslim ban. It took about a year to go through the courts.
And, you and John also talked about whether or not Trump could target people that the administration or Trump himself considers adversaries. What is the likelihood of that happening, and how do you think he would go about it?
Yeah, I mean, he can certainly pass on a so-called enemies list to his Department of Justice. Like, he is seen as the chief prosecutor, as the president of the United States. Every prosecutor that works below him, including his attorney general, works for him. And they could start an investigation into these people. And everyone knows that being investigated is a very, exhausting process for the person who's being investigated. Ultimately, it's up to a grand jury, an independent body, to decide whether they want to move forward with charges. But yeah, he can start that process for sure.
Sorry, I also want to ask you, according to Trump, a billionaire Bill Gates now wants to meet with him. We've seen this kind of parade of wealthy business owners, billionaires, going down to Mar-a-Lago to, kind of kiss the ring. What do you make of this? What do you make of the precedent? And do you think it's becoming a situation where if you don't go, you may be on the outs in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I think these billionaires certainly see that Trump has a very expansive view about his role as president. He can slap tariffs on Mexico and Canada. He's already threatening that right now. He can make business difficult for them, right? Especially if they end up on Trump's enemies list. I think he also, a lot of these men are business minded, and they want to make sure that their companies are in the best position moving forward into the next administration. Usually you would, hire lobbyists, maybe you set up a meeting with the president once he's in office. But with Trump, it is so much about the glad handing and the becoming his best buddy, that they have learned from the past administration that, he's pretty accessible. I mean, if you're Bill Gates, you can get a meeting with him, go to Mar-a-Lago and try to kiss the ring.
Head on down to Palm Beach. All right, Tara Palmieri, thank you so much for joining us.